One of my friends was joking around the other day. He's like, man, if anybody has seen Stranger Things, we love Stranger Things. And it's like, man, are we living in the upside down right now? Like, are we in another world? It's like, and he went on and made some, I was like, well, what do you mean by that? And he's like, well, I mean, illegal immigrants are being treated better than American citizens right now. Criminals have more rights than non-criminals. Debt forgiveness is a reward for not making wise financial decisions and making everybody else who is making wise financial decisions bear that burden. Squatters have more rights than homeowners. Politicians are, becoming decamillionaires. They've become royalty and untouchable, right? Like you think about some of our justice system being weaponized in ways. I don't know if there's, whether you like Donald Trump or not, I don't know if there's ever been a person in US history that has been demonized and attacked more than Donald Trump has over the last 4 years. And when you go back and kind of research some of Donald Trump, everybody loved that dude. He was in pictures with all kinds of celebrities that now absolutely hate his guts, and it's like men are women, women are men, fact checkers are, people that decide they're fact checkers, but they're spreading propaganda. Our border is, only one that our government actually doesn't want to protect. Like, it's just really weird times that we're living in. And it's hard for people to check their own biases because we get wrapped up in the emotions of what all of us are susceptible to, which is being a human being. So it's just a really interesting, supercharged time right now.
Ready. Welcome back to the King's Table podcast. What's going on, boys? Good to see you. We are back.
Missed you guys.
Miss you. We are back
you guys.
in full
it's a highlight
force.
of my week.
All the Kings are here. Of course, we record every single week here on the King's Table podcast. What happened?
No, we don't.
Well, I know. We try. We're really freaking trying. But I'm your host, Ashish Nathu. Of course, I am joined with my best of friends here, Mike Ayala, the sage himself, the hero of hospitality, Matty Aitchison, and of course, the trend spotter. Looking forward to some trends, the one and only Aaron Amuchastegui. So many topics today, lots of fun things going on in the world. There are lots of impacts to each of our businesses, our lives going on right now. So we have a lot to bring to you today. But I thought I'd ask a broader question, kind of gauge the temperature of the room today. We haven't met together, all of us, for 2 or 3 weeks. We've all been busy running around making shit happen. So it's been fun to get back together. And the question I want to ask, and I was actually watching a YouTube video with Tony Robbins, and he did this really great little spiff on this topic. So I thought it'd be a perfect way to start is, what season are you in right now? What season are you in your life? What season is your business in, or your industry perhaps? And what season do you think the world is in? And sometimes all of those things are not necessarily the same. And I mean spring, winter, summer, and fall. Like what is the season you think that you are in each aspect of your life? It's important to understand what season we're in. I've learned this from Mike for sure. Helps you sort of put things into perspective. It helps stop the whining when you're in tough seasons. Manage the ego when you're in easy seasons. But either way, helps just put things into perspective. And I think it'd just be a really great, fun exercise to kind of start with that, get the audience to understand where we're coming from and all the different aspects in a simple framework. So I thought we'd start out with that today, and then we'll get into a bunch of really fun topics. Who wants to start?
I'm just kind of going back to the, does it really matter? I've been nervous lately. Like I'm usually not too nervous. And what I've been really thinking about lately is just like focusing on what you can control. Because, and I don't know, I mean, we all get into different seasons. That's why we have groups of people like this, to kind of shake us when but I'm a little nervous lately. Like there's a lot of stuff that's just happening. And I feel like, so to answer your question on seasons, I feel like I'm in a winter season, and I haven't felt this way since like COVID, which wasn't that long ago. And usually the seasons are longer. But I'm just a little nervous about, what's coming and what's ahead, and the volatility that's just happening. And so I'm tempering that, though. I'll give you the other side of this. So I'm tempering that with like, I've just really come back to like, some of my, I guess, North Stars, my core. And I think as we get smarter and smarter, in air quotations, when you talk to somebody that's like, I've been through 3 downturns, and they almost like get to a point where they're like maybe overly cautious. I don't want to get overly cautious about anything, but I'm just kind of focusing back on fundamentals. So the season that I'm in right now is just kind of like coming back to, Daniel Del Real said this to me, I don't know, 4 weeks ago or something. He said, sometimes life and business and everything in the world's moving so fast, gets so complicated that you just need to come back to like your foundational principles. And so that's what's kind of anchored me lately. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen in the election. I don't know what's going to happen with interest rates. I don't know what's going to happen with, the job market. I don't know what's going to happen with the economy. But really, if you just kind of set all that aside, which is what I've been kind of focusing on, like what are the things that I need to do in my own life and in my own business to just mitigate whatever that is? Because I don't have a lot of control over it. So kind of feel like I'm in a winter, but I feel like it's the tail end of winter, and spring's coming. But I think that's mostly, just making sure that we keep our mindset, or I keep my mindset where it needs to belong, and just control what I can control.
Mr. Muchastegi.
In my personal life, I feel like Punxsutawney Phil, like either, I don't know if it didn't see his shadow or saw his shadow, like it's almost spring, like it's on the edge. But in some of my businesses, man, I am so freaking broke right now. Like I have accounts that are empty. I've got money that I'm like moving around to like make mortgages. I'm paying some shit late right now. And in 2 or 3 days, I'm about to get a giant check. Right? Like I've got this project that I've been working on, and I'm going to start getting a giant check every week after that. But I tell you what, if he doesn't see his shadow soon, or whichever way, like man, I do not like cutting it this close to the edge in this entrepreneurial journey of when you're like, man, like, because we got to put, the way that we really go big, the way that we make incredible amounts of money is when we push all the chips in. Now, maybe you guys are smarter than me and you don't take on as much risk as I do, but it's all about like putting all the chips in at different times and just feeling that. So, man, so in my business world, man, 60 days from now, I'm going to be dancing like it's summer, and I'm going to be talking about how brilliant my plan was. But if stuff wasn't closing for another 2 weeks, we've talked about before that like the difference between like brilliance and success and like, ultimate failure is like, it's like little pennies. It's like, it could be days. It's like days of like overlap of like, I remember like I was going to go get a new job if I didn't buy my first auction house that week, and I got one that week. After 6 weeks of trying, I'm like, okay, this is the last week or I'm quitting. And then I got one. It was like, oh, and then that became a big part of who I am. So, man, it's been rough in that. The, family, personal life, I have this, I feel like I live so many different lives. Overall, my personal life is just always summer because of the way that I see stuff, even though I think a lot of people living the life that I've lived over the past year with some different struggles would feel like it's winter. But something about like seeing the glass is half full and always trying to compartmentalize the stress and trying to convert that stress to pressure. That's probably how we can deal with the ups and downs of the business. The world question of what season we're in, that's a really interesting one, because I just think it's all exciting. Like I think that like, no matter what, like every year, the crazier it gets, the more I'm like, okay, when we read about this in the history books in 20 years, what are we going to be talking about? Like it's the same when COVID was happening, I kept telling people like, look around, because I remember reading about these crazy events that happened when I was, you're a kid in elementary school, you read about these crazy events that happened, and you're like, oh, wow, that happened, like World War II, the draft, like things like that, like crazy events that happen. Is trying to remind myself today, like we are living in these really, really big moments that'll be in history books later. So try to actually look around, like try to not be in panic mode and look around. I was able to do it during COVID. I'm trying to do it now. I think during the first foreclosure crisis, I was too into like needing to survive that I didn't get to like look around at the news. So I think the world is just in one of its seasons, but every year we get our summer, spring, fall, or maybe 1 year's a winter and 1 year's a spring. I know no matter what season we're in that we're going to see summer again in the next 3 to 4 years in the world we live in. I don't think that we're going into an everlasting winter. So as I don't know if that's a non-answer or not. And before we pass it off to Matt, I think we need to remember that Matt is like, he's phasing out of the hero of hospitality into either like the king of commercial, the icon of industrial. I don't know what Matt is going to be, but hospitality is like old news. Like he's been there, done that. He sold that company. Now he's moving on to bigger and better, I think. Right. So let's just keep that in mind. We got the Sultan of sofas. We need the hero of hospitality. Might need an upgrade.
It's funny when you say that, because I was looking at my mantra this year is go to war in 2024. And when I look at kind of what the world is doing, there's maybe some similarities of, that mantra. There is definitely some of that going on in my, my business life, because this was the year that I was really planning on, after coming out of the sale and having somewhat of a soft year last year, just not a lot to, really lean in and get purposeful around. This year, I've got some really great stuff that I'm fired up on, and I'm in the trenches building on every single day. So I'm waking up going to war every day in business. I just got back from Oklahoma on an amazing deal that I'm working through. And I'm sure, all my real estate investors out there can relate. When you get out and you go do your due diligence and you get on site and start working through your plan, it either validates, I feel great about this deal, or it's like, oh shit, this deal is not what I thought it was. This one I feel 10 times better about after getting in town, and I met with the mayor, and I met with the owner and president of the bank that's going to fund it for me. And I met with the city council. I met with the head of business and economic development. I mean, this is probably one of the most exciting deals I think I've ever been a part of in terms of the upside on it. So, but a lot of work, a lot of layers to it. But I'm having fun, man, which is great. I don't mind hard work. I really enjoy that aspect of it. I would rather be working really hard on things I'm passionate about than having a bunch of free time and floating around. So I'm going to war in a lot of areas right now, and I'm gearing up for, going to war in my family, in the perspective of we're about to welcome baby number 3 here in like less than 2 months. So I'm trying to get as much sleep as I can on that front, trying to show up for my wife as best that I can on that front. But man, we're so excited. But overall, it reminds me of what you just said, Mooch. And I recently just did a podcast on kind of the difference between a winning and a losing mindset. And when I think about the people who have won the biggest in my life, you're one person that comes to mind. It's always the people that are willing to lose and just lay it all on the line. And you're somebody that, has continued to do that in so many cool ways. And I love how you're just so transparent and share, as you're going through some of those challenges, because that's the difference between winning and losing in a really big way. And the people who win are often the ones who have probably the most losses behind them. But I forget who it was. I don't know if it was Gary Vee or somebody else who said that, those who are willing to lose over and over and over again to get an occasional win are the ones who generally win the biggest. And when you think about most people, we lose, we get smacked around by life, whether it's, you lost in a relationship, you lost in a financial deal, you lost, in some area of life. And most people go, man, that wasn't for me. I gotta go back to the safe and easy route. And I just commend everybody that's out there taking the risks and being willing to lose to get that occasional win. And it's worthwhile. So I'm in a great season right now, but I'm in a busy and a challenging
I love it. I love all your guys' answers. You kind of now make me question my answer a little bit. So for me, I've realized that I needed to disconnect from the world seasons a little bit, because I feel like it was affecting my other seasons. So I got off all social media. I've been off Instagram, slowing a lot of that kind of input. And it's been really good because I just felt like it was not necessary for me. Besides this and some of our own internal chats of like what's important that I need to be looking at. I guess you guys are my news. What is it that you're looking at that we should be talking about that I'm using as a filter instead of scrounging all this other garbage? So from the world side, I mean, I think it's sort of maybe in the fall, and there's a winter coming from an emotional sentiment perspective. But I think from a numbers perspective, which we'll talk about today economically, I think we're still maybe tail end of spring and summertime. Numbers look really good. So on the business side, my business specifically, I feel a lot of tension as well. Maybe some like Mike. I mean, I use an analogy right now, like just because you won one Super Bowl doesn't mean you'll win the second one. So, maybe we're past the spring, had a really great couple years out of COVID. Definitely COVID was a winter for us from a business perspective, but made it to the spring. And now we're deep into summer, and okay, what's coming post summer? And should we have angst about that? Should we be stressed about that? How long will summer last? So a lot of just maybe tension, stress, over anxiety on all the numbers, or like, is this a downtrend or an uptrend? So a little bit more sensitive than feeling like we have a ton of tailwind. I think there's a lot of economic factors that we're kind of betting and waiting on, but you just don't know what that next shoe to drop is. So it's giving us a little bit of stress, but you're right, Aaron, like it's like you just wait for that couple of big swings and boom, things can change or anything can change at any moment. So, but that's the fun. That's the game of it. But then that's also a lot of tension when you have so much scale. And then on the personal life, thank God. Go ahead.
I just wanted to add one thing because I can hear, sometimes like we all feel and carry that stress and tension with us a little bit. And it reminded me of a quote that I heard that the most successful people are not those who avoid stress. It's those who have learned how to manage and live
so
with stress.
To answer that, like, I feel like I'm in a place where I need to just clean my schedule and deal with the stress head on. And right before we started recording, like I've been on the road for 5 or 6 weeks traveling, spring break, sales trips, this and that. I cleared my whole schedule, got my whole team heads down. We're going to grind through it. And for me, the way I handle stress is I work. I need to get ahead of my skis. I can't feel like I'm always chasing my tail. So that's the season I'm in. And then on the personal side, thank God I'm blessed with 3 beautiful, smiling, sunshine, butterfly rainbows at home. So it's always spring at home, and that's giving a lot of comfort and peace in all the other seasons. So, but yeah, like Mike, it really does come back, and I've learned this the hard way. Is like it really comes back to the routines, getting back to the rhythms, getting back to the daily processes, the blocking and tackling, the singles and doubles, which makes us feel like we are in control of the things that we can control. When we get stressed about all the things we can't control, that's when we have anxiety and all that. So, but thanks for answering that question, guys. I love it. It's been a fun. Go ahead.
I want to spin on that just a little bit. I don't know what is better, spring or summer, right? Like, because when we're saying like what the high note is, so I'm a little confused on that.
No right answer
that,
to my
that
analogy.
part aside,
there's no right answer.
The little mantra. There's no right answer on like if times are awesome, you're like it's so awesome it's spring. I'm like it's so awesome it's summer. Well, I don't know what I'm talking about then. But the stress and pressure, this soapbox that I get on a lot of the times is we think about like one of my morning mantras when I first started doing Miracle Morning and Hal Elrod taught me how to write stuff down is one of my morning mantras is convert stress to pressure.
I love that.
Right. So what does that really mean? So like what is like stress makes us do the wrong thing. Stress makes us feel sick. Stress makes us like want to throw up. Stress makes us want to like, I don't function well if I'm stressed. But professional athletes They're like grace under pressure is what we talk about, right? It's the same input. The same input is something is happening that I have to either rise or fail. It's not easy. Something that is not easy is coming towards you, and it can become stressful or it can create pressure. And athletes and performance and successful people, we have grace under pressure. So pressure will actually raise your adrenaline and help you succeed, where stress will actually break you. And so one of my morning mantras every day. So when something is coming at you, right? Man, I've had a stressful day, right? I really think that, and I know the foo-foo magic for some of you guys out there that don't know how crazy I am yet, the foo-foo magic of just being able to say, like, how am I going to apply this pressure to succeed, right? Like I'm under a lot of pressure is different than I'm under a lot of stress. Just that little thing. I'm under a lot of pressure because you have to think about Kobe Bryant. You got to think about Michael Jordan, and you got to think about, grace under pressure. So if you're having stress out there in your life, a little morning mantra, convert stress to pressure. It's the same input, but it's a very different mindset and a very different output. One makes you not perform. One makes you perform at your fullest.
The real definition of that is eustress. If you haven't heard of that, distress versus eustress, EUSTRESS, moderate or normal physiological or physical stress interpreted as being beneficial. And it's like you said, it's all perspective, right? Stress is there, but is it really tearing you apart, or is it forcing you to elevate your game and show up in a way that actually is going to be beneficial for you in the long term, even though it still sucks when you're under that pressure sometimes?
Yeah. Just thinking about seasons, Bedros Keuilian, I don't know if you guys follow him, but he put a threads up this morning on Instagram, and it said, I don't understand these people who are broke, can't pay their bills, but are doing sound bowls, ice baths, yoga, and journaling every morning. Stop all that shit. It's just false productivity and start making money first thing in the morning. Damn it.
It's a beast.
Now, by the way, I know I have an ice bath at home, and I'm all for the sauna. But here's the reason why I was sharing that. We go through peaks and valleys, and one of the things I went through a season where, like, literally in the morning, I'm writing everything down. I'm trying to, like, what's my priorities today, and this season that I'm in right now, like, I have so much going on, and like the priorities are very clear to me. So I'm not against, like, downtime or ice baths or sound bowls or any of that. But I just loved when I read that this morning from Bedros, because what I want to do is try to find the balance between these seasons of, like Maddie, you sold a business and then you kind of go into this, calmer season. It's a natural tendency in our lives, and we can't always be at the peak and we can't always be at the valley. But I love what you guys are talking about with stress, because so I wear a Whoop band every day. And what's really interesting is just even kind of back to what you guys are talking about, like my stress is actually very low, yet my mind and my, what I think we typically think of as stress as individuals is very high, but I'm regulating that stress. My blood pressure is lower than it's been my entire life. Like I'm healthier than I've been my entire life. So I'm watching all that very closely, and I think we need to. But I think it's just a great example of what Aaron and Maddie are both talking about. Like you can be in an elevated world and not succumb to those pressures.
I love it. I mean, I think there's a healthy process in being able to talk about it too. A lot of people hold their stress, tension, pressure in, and it bears into your body, which is why all these people have found these like other alternative ways, like ice baths and all that. But your Bedros is right, man. Get to work, get shit done, and then go relax and learn. I feel like we've had conversations within the office when people. I think it speaks to the generation we're in, or the time we're in too, Mike, about what you're talking about, because people feel like you can't deal with conflict, you can't deal with high amounts of stress. If you have a stressful day, you got to go home and meditate for 3 hours. Like, if you're a samurai, you don't meditate in the middle of the battlefield. You prepare off the battlefield and you meditate and you stretch and you sharpen your sword, and then you get on the battlefield and you fight. And so that cycle of preparation and fighting and war, and preparation and fighting and war, is cyclical also. And so there are seasons where right now, like, we're in the battlefield, and sometimes you're in preparation of going to war. Sometimes you're in post-war and you need to just heal and rest and recover. So I love the framework. You're right, Mooch. I don't think there's a right answer. I think it's just helping us and the audience frame to get that perspective.
You guys remember when a few months ago I said my life is too okay to actually go do something? I said, like, if I was broke right now, I'd be flying to Arizona, I'd be flying to California, I'd be flying to Nevada, I'd be figuring out where to go fly houses, but I would buy a house, but I was doing just good enough that it was going to prevent me from like finding the big opportunity. And now I am just broke enough that I actually can call out now, I'll make more money in 2024 than I've ever made in a single year. But I really had to have the pressure of the last few months to make me get to work again to go see it. Because when it was just okay enough. So the benefit of seasons is the down season actually creates the drive to create these crazy seasons.
So good. Well, there's a lot going on in the world. Let's pivot. I appreciate you guys working through that. The last week or two have been very exciting. Lots of fun things going on at the Fed, in the stock market, with some of the biggest companies in the world. It's affecting at least my business or my industry. So I want to kind of roundtable this a little bit. Let me see if I can share my screen here. The Dow, the S&P 500, and the NASDAQ have basically taken a 4 or 5% adjustment in like 5 days. Of course, on April 11th, my birthday, Powell started signaling some stuff. Yeah, that's my birthday right there. Not a happy day, but
happy belated, buddy.
Happy peak day.
Happy peak day.
The Fed started signaling that, hey, you know what? We may hold our interest rates higher and don't expect too much. And then they started having a windstorm of conversations, what we've been saying here, which is, why do they have, what's the incentive? What's the motivation? I've really enjoyed this conversation in the circles that I have it outside of this room. Is I think people just expect that there's going to be a rate decrease. I think this is a really big topic right now. It's almost like wishful thinking, and people perhaps don't believe how impartial this guy really is and how good of a job he's doing in staying impartial and not letting politics and other things influence his decision. I would be surprised if we had any rate decreases this year. There are conversations of now rates increasing. The reason why this is important to me, and I'd love to, again, go around the table, and I know we have a lot of other articles that are related to this too, but for us, our major client customer base is our hotel market. And so the hotel market, I'd say half the hotel market is just waiting for the first interest rate reduction. And as soon as that happens, I think we're going to see a waterfall. So that's what I meant by, hey, we're doing good, but we could be doing way better. I think the people are just waiting to make sure they're out of the stress of high interest rates, high interest payments, to turn the hotel occupancy rates. Although TSA throughput is 109% of what it was in 2019, which means 9% more people are traveling today than they were pre-COVID. So the travel industry is crushing it. Hotels are crushing it. Restaurants are crushing it. So just a lot of activity, which is why I'm not convinced that the Fed's going to do anything about it. But I'd love you guys to kind of roundtable. What do you think's going on? The stock market's stressed. This is also probably a signal of the war that happened. I think the bombing that happened in Israel or something. Can't remember what it was, but there's some stuff going on that side of the world, right?
Oh,
some bombings.
Yeah.
So maybe that's some stress that's on the market. So tell me what you guys are watching. What do you think?
Well, I think the reason why travel is up is what Aaron was
getting
talking
on our
about.
ass,
All of us
getting off our
entrepreneurs
asses,
that have been
Mikey.
sleeping. We're like
looking at deals. Yep.
We're going to work.
So what's going to happen with interest rates, Mike?
Man, I don't think interest rates are coming down. But the one thing, and I clipped out Jerome Powell's video. And I don't know if we have a second to watch it. We probably. Let me share.
While you're pulling that up, Jerome Powell's comments around the lack of progress this year on inflation and the recent data have clearly not given us greater confidence, and instead indicate that it is likely to take longer than expected to achieve that confidence on inflation. that's obviously the biggest concern that most people have right now, right? Is the June rate cut, which I think 2 weeks ago was at 56% chance of a 25 bit rate cut. As of this morning, the market is now pricing in September for the first rate cut, with the
Yep.
probability of June's rate cut at now just 14%. So I'm curious. I know Aaron's been of the camp that they're going to hold it higher longer, or maybe even raise rates. I am definitely not in the camp that they are going to raise rates. But that being said, I would love to hear what your guys' thoughts are.
Yeah, let's do. So I'll riff on it for a second. I don't know if you guys saw my Instagram video a couple days ago. My fine print I need to say is, everybody, I'm not
You wish
just
you
a
were
jerk
wrong. This
out
is not
here.
a
I wish I was
self-serving
wrong
opinion.
on reading. I would. Right. I would, like, by me saying, hey, rates are going to stay high and they're not going to make the change, and why. Like, I wish that I had so many people that hate me for it. Sentiment is changing a little bit, though, because I know back in September, October, November, when I was saying it, people thought I was nuts, and people just love the good news, and we can't blame people for wanting to share good news when it happens, and we just try to bring a more real approach to it. But yes, like, the more and more news is coming out now, but I guess the sentiment that I believe is changing is the fact that I did a video on this a couple days ago when this article came out where they're talking about, mortgage rates not dropping and the Fed not dropping the rates, and now the changes of the likelihood happening. And I did a little poll and said, are rates going to be going up, going down, or staying the same this year? And I had something like 70% of the people that followed it say they are going to be staying the same. Now, mind you, there are people that follow my content, and they've probably heard me talking about it on Instagram
They're
a
in
whole
your echo
lot.
chamber, bro. Come on.
They're in my echo chamber, so maybe, but at least that sentiment is changing a bit. But, like, here's the article on my little piece of it before Mike shows his video, and so now all the articles weeks ago was like, oh, maybe they won't be lowering, and now this one says, this is a Bloomberg economics article, Fed hiking rates to 6.5% is a real risk for UBS strategists. We see the growing chance of inflation failing to decline to target. Fed hikes would flatten treasuries, knock 10 to 15% off equities. So it means that there's enough risk that they might actually raise rates that people are trying to now price that in some of their moves on the market. If the expansion remains resilient, inflation gets stuck to 2.5% or higher, there'd be a real risk of FOMC resumes raising rates again by early next year, reaching 6.5% Fed funds by mid next year. Now, again, you always have to qualify who's telling you the news, but I guess the biggest reason to share the news, right? Like, so none of us are right, or none of us are experts in any of that. But 90% of the news in January was that rates are going to get cut, and they're going to get cut fast. And then now it's just changing. And so now it's like half and half. And so it doesn't really matter who's right, but it is saying it was a very one-sided conversation before, and now it's more in the middle, which means people are launching on that. Yep, it's been my soapbox. It's been my Roman Empire, studying rates and studying, what the guy talks about.
You
when
think
they
they're
see
going
it.
to cut this year, or you think they're going to hold through 2024 and first cuts in 2025? Or are they going to raise?
No rate cuts this year. No rate cuts this year is what I'm betting on and planning on. And I really just wish they would tell people that, because then people in Ash's industry would come back to business. If they would quit like selling hope, like
what's
false
the probability
hope, and
they
just said,
increase?
you know what? And I think that's actually what Powell's trying to do now.
So either they just hold it for longer because it's not being tamed, but you do not think they accelerate the control by increasing the rate.
All right, here's if I go really deep. I think they're going to hold it through the end of the year. I think people are going to start to realize they're going to hold it through the end of the year. So then people are going to come back to the market and start buying again, and inflation gets worse before the end of the year, even by holding it. Because once it holds, people are coming back into the real estate market. People are coming back in the hotel market. So then I do think there's a chance of a raise in like April next year. Because I think inflation will go up, because by the end of this year, people will start spending money again, realizing this is the new normal.
It's an interesting theory.
Don't bet on me.
It's an interesting theory, though. I mean, it's valid too, right? I mean, you could definitely you could see the data and make that argument. I don't think that's the case. I think they're going to cut in Q3. I think they're going to make a cut in Q3 going into the election.
Well, I have some audio issues. I sent it over to Tim. We'll see if he can pull it up.
My colleagues and I remain squarely focused on our dual mandate to promote maximum employment and stable prices for the American people. The economy has made considerable progress toward our dual mandate objectives. Inflation has eased substantially, while the labor market has remained strong. And that is very good news. But inflation is still too high. Ongoing progress in bringing it down is not assured, and the path forward is uncertain. We are fully
Tim,
committed to returning inflation.
What's just so interesting, and I've watched this like 15 times, and you can even see in his body language. When he
needs
talks
unemployment,
about
he needs a ton
the
of
job
unemployment
growth still being strong. That's the only thing that, and we've been talking about this for months and months and months. And this is why, like, even when, you take a group like this and Aaron's like, they're not cutting and maybe they raise, like, I don't even think that they know, because there's some variables out there that are not just, traditional black and white. And it's been this way for a while. But what he's talking about with the dual mandate is obviously part one is controlling inflation. How do they do that? Through interest rates, getting interest rates higher, trying to cool things down. But the thing, and I'm not saying anything that everybody doesn't know, the thing that happened during this season is like the job market just kept growing and growing and growing. And I think until we start seeing drastic slowdowns in businesses and employment start to drop, we're not going to see a big drop in interest rates. And we've been wrestling with this from, a real estate perspective, even a business lending perspective. There's a lot of people, just even like, I don't know if Maddie said it or Aaron did, but like businesses like Ashes that are like waiting for interest rates to come down to, launch really. But the reality is, like, I think what's scary in that whole thing is if they bring interest rates down, then it's going to just create a flurry of activity that's going to cause inflation to go back up. And we're even seeing the numbers right now. It's not huge, but inflation is ticking back up. And so the only thing that I kind of wrestle with, and the reason why I've watched this so many times, I think he's telling us plain and simple that until we slow down the job market, nothing's going to change. And that's the thing that, like, there's this dual side of it, because everybody's waiting for interest rates to come down. But I don't know that we actually want that, because the only way that interest rates are actually going to come down is if a whole bunch of people are out of work and we're no longer at 3%, 3.5% unemployment, and we're pushing up to 4, 4.5, 5, 6. And that's a bad day for, so many people. And I dropped that article. I mean, Tesla just laid off 14,000 people. When that starts happening at scale, even Ash, back to what you were saying, we're just like waiting for interest rates to come down so that we can get back to normal. Interest rates are not coming back down. And if they do come back down, we're not going to be back to normal, because that means that the job market's crushed. And if people don't have jobs, then they're not spending money. And that's the only way to level out this whole thing that everybody keeps waiting for. And I don't think it's a good day when interest rates drop. I really don't.
Bad news is good news, right? And at least in terms of the Fed and what they're trying to do. But it's not good news for the everyday American. I think it's a different dynamic, though, too, right? With inflation, and a big part of what they even said is, yeah, we're looking at CPI, but really we're looking at PCE. And a big portion of PCE factors in housing and shelter. And obviously we know...
What's PCE, Maddie?
So essentially PCE is factoring in shelter, energy, and it's not just around consumer goods. And so when you think about how, shelter being as hot and inflated as it is, and we don't really see that slowing down anytime soon, that's a different dynamic that they're fighting against. And then also, right, we've got so many people working 2 jobs just to be able to afford and keep up with their everyday lifestyle and expenses. So until that shifts, right, job data is going to continue to remain relatively strong. Because if you look at the last jobs report, and I'll pull it up here in a second, a significant amount of that data was around part-time jobs.
Interest rates will increase real estate prices, not decrease them, right?
I guess what I was going to think was, so interest, like when Matt said it affects the everyday people, higher rates affect the everyday people. Does it? Like, I guess credit cards, car loans, things like that, everything, so like higher rates does make cars less affordable. But I think it brings rents down. Because we just like we've had vacancies, we're bringing rents down. I don't know. Maybe it does affect everyday people. I know it affects real estate.
Yeah,
I know
fascinating.
it affects real estate.
Well, I think that there's been a lot of consolidation. The hotel industry is incredibly fragmented. Very large hotel ownership groups that were, let's say, the publicly traded companies took advantage of low interest rates over the last 3 to 5 years, even during COVID, and bought up a bunch of stuff. So now that interest rates go up, their cost in real estate has gone way up. They have huge balance sheets they can hold on, and they have long life cycles so they can invest. The middle market hotel owner can't do that. They need to see signs that their debt costs are going to start going down before they start putting millions of dollars into their portfolio to renovate. Unfortunately, if you didn't renovate in the last 5, 6, 7 years, you're way behind style, trend, and your competition. So you almost need to and should, but you're too afraid to because you don't know if there's a cliff that you're going to invest all this money and you're not going to have the liquidity if interest rates stay here for, let's say, a year. And then you have all the brands. Now, the brands are a really interesting part. Marriott, Hilton, IHG, Choice. Hotel occupancy, like I said before, travel, TSA throughput, ADR, which is average daily rate, is higher than the industry has ever seen. So the brands want their hotels to be fresh and clean and competitive in the market. So they're pushing owners to get it done. And so this tension between owners wanting to spend money and brands is a really critical component in the business moving forward. So I don't know if the election has anything to do with the hotel industry right now. I think it all has to do with the cost of debt. So that's why this is so important to the travel market. I was studying, CBRE put out a nice book where they're also showing that pre-COVID we're having like a 20% reduction of people coming to the United States, but we're having a 20% increase in the people leaving the United States and traveling the world, which is really fascinating too. So we're not a place where people want to come and travel. That has significantly decreased. And so we're compensating that through different things, but these travel trends in the United States. I think we put into the chat too that, people are running out of their savings, which I think is an interesting topic. We've talked about this. I think maybe Maddie, you talked about this too 4, 5, 6 months ago. Like you showed a chart about when people are literally going to run out of money. When are they going to run out of their savings? And I think we're at the tail end of that too. So be interesting to see what happens here. We can talk about Tesla if you want. Rivian had its best, and then, Tesla's falling apart, laying off tons of people. There's just a lot of interesting pressures, ups and downs. But yeah, I don't know. Until unemployment starts to collapse, I'm getting a lot of pressure on salaries too. Salaries are increasing, harder to find good people. And so these dynamics are just confusing and complicated.
Yeah, it is confusing. Here, I'll just wrap this up on PCE. So core PCE is the Federal Reserve's preferred measure of inflation. Core PCE excludes food and fuel, which are two categories that frequently experience the largest price swings. Increases in both PCE and core PCE can signal an increase in inflation. Decreases may signal a decline in inflation. So I think that's why they like to use PCE, because food and energy, oil prices are so volatile that it's not
They change all the time.
It's
Yeah.
not always the most accurate measure of what's really going on Main Street, and how the consumers are experiencing spending increases or decreases.
Yeah,
That makes sense. Thanks. Well, the reason I asked you is because I didn't know.
Yeah.
Right. So when you're starting to talk about PCE is the difference. So it's like, I'd love to, I wanted to learn, like, what do you mean and why do they do that? But then right as you explain the definition, that makes sense.
Yeah.
They're like, no, you can't count fuel because fuel just changes based on all sorts of things, and it
Yeah.
usually doesn't last one way or another.
Yeah, there's prices for goods, prices for services. Those are the two core things that are in headline. And then you got prices for food and energy prices that are excluded from that. And those are ultimately what make up the entire index of it. But for February numbers, prices for goods went up 0.5% from January to February. Prices for services increased 0.3% from January to February. Prices for food increased 0.1%, and
Wow.
energy prices increased 2.3% from January to February. So,
You know what's so valuable about these types of conversations for me? And this goes back to what I was saying during the question that Ash asked about, just seasons, and there's just chaos, right? And I'm just like sitting here thinking about this conversation right now. And
You
like,
tell
if I'm
us,
the
audience.
like listening to this, I'm like, what do we do with this? And I think what is so valuable. So this is what I love about this. And this is why I love having conversations with you guys, is because it goes back to what I was saying earlier. Like, we're just in this crazy time of volatility. And I don't know, maybe the powers that be that are, handling the puppet strings or whatever, maybe they know, but I don't think anybody knows right now. And that's why these conversations are so valuable. And back to what I was saying earlier, it's like, I know that there's volatility and I know it's chaos, but just coming back to like, fundamentally, like what do I know to be true, whether it's in my business, my job, my home? Because I think this just highlights that everybody's trying to figure it out. And Ash, you said this a few minutes ago, Rivian's blowing up, Tesla's imploding. Like, you just never know. And as business owners, as employees, as individuals, like, we just really have to come back to like, what can we control and what do we not have control over, and what do we do with this type of information?
I think that a great part of entrepreneurship is to learn how to think better, right? And like right now, what assumptions are we making? What do we think we know? What I like about the season conversation is when you're in spring and everything is growing and your business is doing great, you're like, man, I did such a great job. I'm amazing. I'm the smartest guy in the world. Well, sorry, brother, you were riding a wave. Like, if everything is growing, you have just a higher probability of success. So now there's winter, then you start to blame other people. Oh, the economy, all this, all your assumptions that you expected to serve you are no longer serving you. So this is a really fun time when you see all this contradictory information, when you see interest rates not adjust, when the whole world and expectations are that they are adjusting. It's like, what am I assuming? What do I think I know that I don't really know? What are the decisions I'm making that are based on perhaps false assumptions? Where are my assumptions biased? I think that's what I love about this interest rate conversation. It's such a bloody biased conversation. It's like, it's really hard when you talk to real estate guys. I mean, I have my board telling me, I'm like, guys, I don't understand why they would introduce. He's like, no, they're going to have to. I'm like, that's absolutely a biased opinion. You just want it to. You just want it to, and you maybe need it to, which is why you think it'll happen. So just really fun. And the audience gets the blessing of this. It's like, we guys, you can hear us. We're literally, I mean, we're not squirming, but we're literally like stepping all over each other, trying to figure out what is the meaning of all of this and what do we do with it all. And Mikey said it, just focus on what you can control. Maddie.
I was joking around with one of my friends was joking around the other day. He's like, man, if anybody has seen Stranger Things, we love Stranger Things. And it's like, man, are we living in the upside down right now? Like, are we in another world? It's like, and he went on and made some, I was like, well, what do you mean by that? And he's like, well, I mean, illegal immigrants are being treated better than American citizens right now. Criminals have more rights than non-criminals. Debt forgiveness is a reward for not making wise financial decisions and making everybody else who is making wise financial decisions bear that burden. Squatters have more rights than homeowners. Politicians are, becoming decamillionaires. They've become royalty and untouchable, right? Like, you think about some of our justice system being weaponized in ways I don't know if there's, whether you like Donald Trump or not, I don't know if there's ever been a person in US history that has been demonized and attacked more than Donald Trump has over the last 4 years. And when you go back and kind of research some of Donald Trump, everybody loved that dude. He was in pictures with all kinds of celebrities that now absolutely hate his guts, and it's like men are women, women are men, fact checkers are, people that decide they're fact checkers, but they're spreading propaganda. Our border is, only one that our government actually doesn't want to protect. Like, it's just really weird times that we're living in. And it's hard for people to check their own biases because we get wrapped up in the emotions of what all of us are susceptible to, which is being a human being. So it's just a really interesting, supercharged time right now. And it is challenging, right? Not to get wrapped up in headline news or to get wrapped up in some Instagram account that you like or don't like, and to kind of sort through all of the cloudiness that, every single one of us are kind of trying to navigate to figure out how to make the next best decision for what we're trying to solve for in terms of our outcomes.
This is insanity. Like, nobody's even talking about this. More than 37,000 Chinese citizens were arrested for illegally crossing the southern border in the U.S. in 2023. Like, it's just crazy.
Did you see, like, there are boats storming the beaches of Normandy in California right now?
I was at my one of my mobile home parks last week in Kansas, and I told Kara, I said, I'm moving to Kansas. Like, I'm moving to Kansas.
Life is simple out there, huh?
Yeah.
Dude, we got to give Mike a shout out for that, of the entrepreneurial journey. Right. So if you guys aren't following Mike on Instagram, the listeners out there, so Mike has he had a problem with some of his developments, and he decided to fly out there and go stay in the mobile homes and work on site and start like working alongside people to go see the thing. And I was like texting him like, bro, are you okay? Like, you're staying in one of the mobile homes out there in Kansas right now. But that's the entrepreneurial journey too, of like, you got, sometimes in order to solve the problem, you got to go see it yourself. And so I just want to give Mikey a shout out as he was living in his mobile homes out in Kansas last week.
Well, I responded to Aaron with like the full story. There was a power plant shutdown going on in this little town. So every single hotel was like completely booked. And so I was either going to have to drive an hour and a half to Kansas City every day or stay in a mobile home. So I stayed in one of my mobile homes.
Hey, you do what you got to do.
A self-driving car.
Is in Indonesia. I don't know if anyone knew that, but he's in Indonesia, diversifying supply chain, getting Indonesia and all these other huge economies ready for manufacturing. I'm really stressed about the growth potential of China. So they're looking at Indonesia, Brazil, India, all these other places to invest in manufacturing. Elon Musk is also traveling, looking for manufacturing facilities outside of China, outside the United States. But I will say also from my experience, I just had a big team come back from China. People are nervous about what's happening in China right now. People are trying to insulate themselves from this. So, and Mooch, well, the real estate market is in shambles. Definitely a lot of exports have gone down. So people are not exporting out of China as much, right? So people are moving outside of China into other countries. You have huge multi-billion-dollar companies like Apple and Tesla and saying, hey, we got to slowly diversify. Unfortunately, supply chains take 10, 20, 30 years to move. It's not that fast. It's not that easy. And you have a very interesting government in China that is sort of run by one human being for almost 2 billion people, which by definition, you just become out of touch. And so you're starting to see different types of pressures and dynamics in China that you've never seen before, in terms of like people actually saying things and being outraged. Things that we can do here in America that we take for granted, like petition or storm streets and do things like that. You can't do that shit in China. Yeah, can't do that shit in China. So you start to see more of that. It's like, interesting. That's a big change.
So one of the interesting things about this article, sorry, I got a little delay on my connection over here. It talks about like when China first entered the world, it created this like crazy shock. I remember the first dresser my dad got that was bought in China from Costco for like $200 and could not believe how freaking nice it was, how nice the assembly was, how great it was. And he goes, and it was made in China. And we were excited, right? So China Shock 1.0 was China started producing all of these like high quality things in the past 20 to 30 years. And we welcomed it. Like, this is freaking awesome. It actually lowered our inflation at the time because our dollar was able to buy more. Like, I remember again being so wild that we were excited that we were buying something from China and could not believe how great it was when it was happening. But the cost of that at the time was US based furniture manufacturers were hurt, right? Anything that they started producing in China was putting US people out of business. So where, even though it lowered inflation at the time and it like increased life and livelihood for most of the people that lived in the US, it affected some people in a negative way. Well, now they're worried about, and they call that like, so this article talks about it as China Shock 1.0, but then it says how Beijing could be creating China Shock 2.0. So before, when they decided to enter an industry, it kind of shocked the US. They took over the industry, but now they're getting into bigger things. So they're putting in electric vehicles, lithium ion batteries, and solar cells is something that they're going to be jumping into more and more. Like they already control all the phones. Like, I don't know what percentage of phones in the US are China based, but all of them. So taking over electric vehicles, batteries, solar cells, things like that. Like, just imagine again that they lower in the prices of everything. So we welcome it. What does that do to US production on stuff? And then also, what does that do if then we're relying on China for things like batteries and solar cells? And that'd be like relying on China for our oil, right? Or potentially. So that's the talk about it. And I think with Ash being in furniture, maybe there's even more to it than that. Or if you guys have even heard or thought about it.
Well, there's a great book called The Factory Man. Tells everybody about anti-dumping, which means when a country basically illegally imports or exports products into that country lower than the manufacturing cost. The United States sort of invented that concept. We have it in like multiple categories, but furniture is a big one, where in the early 2000s, China was basically shipping furniture into the United States lower than people in the United States could actually make it. That's called anti-dumping. That book is amazing. Really, really great book. Talks about America's Martinsville and Bassett and Thomasville, all the biggest furniture brands in the world going to zero, literally zero. We taught them how to do everything. I think that's really important for people to remember. They didn't know anything. We took all our old white guys from Thomasville and High Point and Virginia and we shipped them over there and we taught them how to do everything. So it's just a fun dynamic. But you see this in they're falling behind in terms of manufacturing. The challenges in manufacturing too, and I think I mentioned this on the pod, is you don't have a young population that's interested in manufacturing in China anymore. So everybody in the factories, at least in the non-tech factories, they're all over 50 years old, 45, 50 years old. So they got another decade or two. They have an aging population issue as it is. But if you're educated in China, you don't want to be working in a factory. You want to be in service business, or you want to be in tech, or you want to be in finance. So they have a huge problem in manufacturing. And so what China's doing now is like, well, we better go after tech. We better go after EV. We better go after solar and finance. We better own Hong Kong. We better take control of Hong Kong. And right on the cusp of that, I think Elon a few weeks ago said, hey, if the United States doesn't start creating rules of what China can and cannot do with EV, Tesla will go out of business. You're going to put us out of a business. And then, Mike, you shared in the group chat, here we go, 14,000 people laid off with Tesla.
Well, if you look at what's interesting about that too, I heard a stat the other day that, and I don't remember the exact numbers, but the United States, with the amount of electric cars that we're buying, like we're consuming, I don't know, somewhere upwards of 67% or something of the lithium batteries as a whole. And only like 1.5% of the lithium is actually mined in the United States, which just brings up an interesting point on what you were saying, Ash, about the old white guys and us teaching them. Did you also know that the United States has more IKEAs than any other country in the world? And it just like kind of blows my mind listening to what you're saying, because we are the biggest consumer nation and we get to decide what type of consumer goods we want to buy. And the fact that we're addicted to cheap goods means that we have to produce it elsewhere. But the reality at some point in time is like, you know, the old saying of like, have your cake and eat it too. Like, we're the ones that we have more IKEAs than any other country in the nation, a German or Swedish company, but we have more IKEAs because why? We love the cheap product, but at some point in time, and there's two sides to every argument like this. It's like, well, you know, bring manufacturing back. Well, if we bring manufacturing back, it's going to be more expensive, and do we actually want that? And at some point in time, you know, there's a place where these desires cross, and we just have to make the determination, like, are people going to buy this stuff at a higher price point, or are we just going to keep manufacturing it low? You know, back to what you were saying about Elon, it's not, you know, it's not just putting regulations on China, because China controls the majority of the lithium. And, you know, everybody wants electric cars and other types of energy and everything. But this is the problem with the world that we live in today, is there's all these like dueling conflicts when it comes to everything.
Yep.
And in reality, like, okay, you want more electric cars, but you've got lithium mines that are one of the most destructive mines that exist. I came from a gold mining community, and you would be shocked at how long it takes from the time they find a gold deposit till that gold mine goes into production in the United States of America. Kara's whole family is in gold mining, and they go overseas and they mine in, you know, China and Indonesia. My father-in-law's worked all over the world. And the reason why they do that is because when they find a gold deposit in Indonesia, it's like 2 years to production. When you find a gold deposit, you guys may not know this, but Northern Nevada has one of the largest gold deposits in the world. Yeah. It is one of the wealthiest gold deposits that exists anywhere. But because of politics and red tape, it takes 15 years to get a mine from, like, when they find the gold deposit to actually get it into production, if they even can. Wow. And so it's like all this regulation, that this is why it's so cheap to do it everywhere else. And so I don't know where this ends, but at the end of the day, like, everybody's arguing for, you know, all these different viewpoints, like cheaper product, bring manufacturing back to the United States. Well, which one do you want? Like, which is it?
I think they're going to pick cheap products.
Everyone has values until it hits their pocketbook. Right. There's a lot of things I won't do until it affects my family. Right. And there's a lot of things I won't do to eat until I struggle eating. So, yeah, I think that people choose cheap. Something to be maybe something to mention about the Tesla layoffs, right? The 14,000 layoffs. I think maybe it's just a symbol of Tesla is probably going to stop growing, meaning they don't have a next thing on the horizon. Elon's probably going to take the Tesla robot and spin it off into another company. And I guess, so to go back on like what I'm thinking about that. So companies, when they're growing, they're adding on employees, and they're growing and they're growing and growing because they aren't thinking about profits, because it's about growing top line. It's about bringing on new products. It's about trying to see how many people you have in your recurring sales network and your purchases. So companies, big companies like that, don't think about profit much. They think about growth, and you hire people to grow. Once you have figured out that you can't grow anymore, right? And that's how I do it in my software companies and everything else. Once you figure it, even our real estate development companies, once you figure out you can't grow anymore and you go, cool, now this is our income, that's when you cut expenses and go, okay, now it's time to get profitable. Whether in our real estate company, it's like, okay, we're not flipping houses anymore. We're going to do layoffs to make sure, if we're just a property owner now and we're just a property manager that makes money on our rents, well, now we got to cut costs and focus on what we can. We're not growing anymore. So I think the Tesla layoffs, I mean, there's a lot of different theories in some of the articles. It's just more about the fact that Tesla just isn't, they don't have another product now. They have the truck, they have the X, they don't have anything else that's on the horizon in the next couple of years. They're done growing. Now it's time to get profitable with what they've got. And so we'll probably see some more cuts and more layoffs, because it's not necessarily an unhealthy thing. It's a season. It's like a winter of business thing, where you do healthy layoffs to make sure you maintain profitability when you learn you can't keep growing.
I forget.
Well, one of the main reasons, and will somebody pull up that article? I couldn't grab it, but one of the main reasons why I actually even put this on here, just reinforcing what Aaron was just saying, like, I don't think this is a bad thing. I think this is readjusting. And when you look at the amount of pressure that Tesla has gotten from the current administration, and, you know, I mean, incentives going to other car manufacturers, and singling out Tesla, just the way that Biden, and this is old news, but the way that Biden said, had the GM CEO or whatever saying that she's like leading. It doesn't surprise me that Tesla is doing this. The main reason why I pulled this up, if you read this article, this is so biased toward and against Tesla. Like it just goes on and on and on about how horrible of a person Elon Musk is. And one of the things, like this whole thing talks about, by the way, yeah. And if you look at the tone in this letter, if Tesla needs to lay off 14,000 people, and I've said this for years, like I've never had to lay off 14,000 people, but I had a company of 100 that I had to lay off 30. And that's hard. It's hard to lay off one person. But when you look at an organization, when you have to make tough decisions, you have to do what's in the best interest of the organization, or the other 100,000 employees are not going to have a job. And the shareholders are going to lose all of their investment if they're not careful. And when you look at this, this is such a one-sided argument and article, because it's like, oh, poor employees, which I'm sad for everybody that lost their job. So hear my heart when I'm saying this. But the reality at the end of the day is like business. We're going to see more of this too, by the way. So, this is, I don't want to go off on this, but like, what employee in the world anywhere like controls their future? We started off this conversation today talking about, as an entrepreneur, how challenging it is. What's more challenging than going to work and going to war? And at least we have the ability to decide whether our businesses succeed or fail, is showing up, as this story talks about, an employee trying to badge in and her badge is shut off. Like, you have no control over your future when you're just you're just a cog in a bigger wheel. And then when this stuff happens, people are like shocked by it. Well, the reality is,
It's easier to get a house mortgage
It
with the W-2.
is. It's way easier to
It's
get a
the
house
way the
mortgage.
machine is built, baby.
Sorry, I couldn't help myself.
This is
It
not
is.
on accident.
The funny thing, there's two funny things on that article. The one is there's a complaint that they emailed the 14,000 people. I tell you what, if you're laying off 14,000 people, you're not going to, there's no way to have 14,000 conversations. I'm sorry. Email is probably the best, quickest, easiest way to do that. So one, like, yeah, if you're going to email 14,000 people, mentally and morally, you're going to send an email, because I hate laying one person off. It's the most horrible feeling in the world. I'm not going to do it all day long for months and months, is one of that arguments. And then, but Mike's talk about being an employee and being a W-2, like that article is saying poor employee, poor this, which is all true. But if an employee gets a better job, they're going to quit and go find another one. Right? If they get a better paying job somewhere else, they're going to quit without notice and find another one. So like at will employment means you can quit whenever you want and you can get fired whenever you want. There's two sides to that deal.
But I think it's funny, Mike, which what you're mentioning too, is I think it's just funny the sentiment of the article when Elon does it. When Facebook, Google, Amazon, everybody did it a year ago or 6 months, nobody even said a damn thing. Oh, okay, they're recalibrating their income statement, they're fixing their balance sheets, they're reducing their costs, they're going to AI. Okay, no problem. He does it in the form of, and they did it via email too. In fact, they did it before they laid them off. We're going to cut 15,000 people at the end of first quarter before. So now you don't even know if you're going to be on that list or not. Nobody wrote anything about that. But he does it, and it's like, oh, he's such a mean guy. So sad. That's also telling.
The news is stupid.
He's been in the crosshairs of a lot of people for the last few years, as he has spoken out about the woke agenda and a lot of what's been going on. Nation, I mean, did you see what's going on with X in Brazil?
No.
I'll see if I can pull it up, but ultimately in Brazil, they are trying to Brazil's going through like a very big, the president is a pretty far leftist president, and there's some uproar going on about that. And just like there was in, America, hence why he bought X to kind of create and protect, free speech. This president has been asking them to remove a lot of the, right accounts and censoring free speech, and he said he wouldn't. So individuals that aren't supporting that, and here I'll say, because Elon Musk is refusing to censor accounts that expose the government is now going after ex-employees who have now been told they will be arrested. Elon is trying to get them to safety before he does a full data dump of many of the corruption that has been found. The Brazilian government is now so afraid of free speech that yesterday the government declared its intention to terminate all contracts with Elon Musk's Starlink, citing concerns over the company's influence on Brazil's democratic institutions and freedoms. Starlink has been a vital part of internet access in remote regions of Brazil, particularly the Amazon, where it has been crucial for schools and medical clinics. Elon then doubled down and said he would give it to them for free if the government wouldn't honor their contract. So there's a lot of stuff going on with Brazil right now. I think even the political opposition to this Democratic president right now is going through the exact same thing that Trump is going through right now, where they are literally going after him and prosecuting him and doing all. So interesting, right? Just to see, if you're speaking out against the establishment or the powers that be, there's definitely a lot more attention, scrutiny, danger that, comes along with it. And it takes some brave people to stand up, against stuff like that. And I think that's why you see, so many people getting behind Donald Trump. Like, I'm not a fan of Donald Trump in the sense of that's not my dude. I don't feel like he represents me. I'm not like, yes, Donald Trump, right? I'm not like a Donald Trumper. What I think a lot of people forget is that MAGA now is about America. It's about people searching for someone who's willing to fight against the corruption that they see and to preserve the freedoms that they believe should be preserved. And Donald Trump just happens to be that voice. He just happens to be the dude that is doing that right now on a scale in America, which I think is partly the reason why we have, gone from him just being a celebrity and a businessman to now being a political opponent that they are literally trying to destroy. They're not only trying to destroy him, they're trying to jail him. So it's just very interesting. If you would have saw this kind of stuff, just going back to some of the protests and sit-ins, right? Like you saw the other day, all of these protests on the left of, blocking bridges and airports and cities. If that would have happened and it was MAGA people, right? Those individuals would be in jail. They would be facing some serious time and issues, right? I mean, you look at some of these groups that have sat in on abortion clinics and prayed for these people, and they're literally in jail, facing jail time, long-term jail time. You look at some of the January 6th people, they are getting significant, punishments. So it's just very interesting to see, like, when you start stripping back a lot of, let's just say, strip back the name of Donald Trump and then just look at all of the things that have happened and all of the things they're trying to do to that individual based on what happened. If you were to insert Joe Biden name, right, it would be a different outcome in what's actually playing out in terms of what they're trying to do to him. So I just find it very interesting. Like, I'm not here going, hey, we got to go Trump. I think people are just going, hey, we've got somebody that's willing to lead from the front. Elon Musk is another one of these individuals that's like, hey, I'm just calling a spade a spade. I'm just trying to make common sense common again and calling out some of these things. And when you go against the powers that be, that's a dangerous game to play. But I commend some of these individuals, whether you like them or not, you like how they say it or not, you like how they carry themselves or not. When you strip down the names and the personalities and you look at the results and what they're actually trying to accomplish, it's interesting to watch.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons we admire Vivek. I think one of the reasons I admire Donald Trump. One of the reasons I admire Elon Musk. One of the reasons I want to keep going. Right. Like one of the reasons why it's like, no, I want to do more. I want to be more. I want to become the billionaire. I want to do the things, because then you can have some influence without the fear of repercussion. Or how about this idea where they do it knowing there's going to be repercussion and they do it anyway?
Mm-hmm.
There's very few people that are like Americans that we get to see that will do stuff knowing that they are putting their everything they've built their whole lives on the line. Like, I'll put everything on the line to make some extra money this year. We got people putting everything on the line to try to like change the world for good.
Yeah.
Right. That's freaking, it's a whole different ball game.
Are you guys on his email list?
No.
Who?
Donald Trump.
No.
It's so good. Look at this. This will be.
I mean, he is by far the most narcissistic person I've ever met. But that being said,
President Trump, the Trump hating judge won't take you off my gag order, but he can't silence you. So before I spend another day in court, I need to know, are you endorsing me for president? The lying liberal media says this is the moment my supporters abandon me. They think you'll give up now that I face life in prison. And what better way to prove them wrong than joining millions of patriotic Americans in endorsing Trump for president?
And if anyone thinks that him being convicted and in jail is going to somehow prevent him from being elected, they're crazy. This is going to be fun. It's going to be a fun next 5 or 6 months. November, we're upside down land. We got 7 months
we're
left.
living in the upside down, y'all. I'm telling you.
I want to get into real estate, and then we can wrap it up. We have a couple interesting topics about real estate too. Just before I go there really quick, I don't know if you guys, and I just want to call this out to the audience. There's this really interesting lady that I've been watching, Tulsi Gabbard. Have you guys watched her? Mooch, same thing. Like, watch the people that know they're walking into fire and that they're going to end up getting burned. Those are the interesting people. I feel like she's one of those people, and will be a rising name in politics. Wouldn't it be awesome if we get her on the podcast? Oh my God, that'd be so freaking cool. But yeah, she, I don't want to get too lost into it right now, but she was a super young. She ended up being a senator from Hawaii. She ended up being she was a Democrat in the DNC, I think. And then they basically abandoned her because she didn't do things that they wanted her to do, and then got ousted and then lost everything. And
she was too centrist.
Interesting, very interesting lady. Now she's a Republican. And so I think she's an up and comer. She's on the VP list for Trump. She just had a really great interview with Tucker Carlson. Yeah. So I'm only mentioning her not to endorse or anything, but to say that it's an interesting character when we talk about people that have opportunities to take power and do what they're told, or to face power and stand for what's right. What are the outcomes? So just a fascinating story. But let's talk about Texas. Let's talk about institutional real estate. This is a fun topic that a lot of the guys here have great experience in. Governor Greg Abbott wants Texas legislature to rein in investors. We've seen that institutional investors from Wall Street significantly increased home prices during COVID-19 pandemic, but they want to stop it. There's another article that you mentioned here as well, Mooch, about land. We'll pull that up as well, where they're trying to prevent land acquisition. So talk about what's going on here. Why is this important? Why should we care? What's happening?
Yeah, well, I think they're both kind of related. So one of the articles was mine and one of the articles was Matt's, right? So Matt had posted the Indiana pushes bill to ban China from buying farmland, right? So that's one. And then Governor Abbott in Texas, one of the reasons that Texas is also a great place is Tucker Carlson was at a comedy mothership for like a random podcast one night with Joe Rogan and people. So you just mentioned Tucker Carlson and Texas and all the things we get to see. So the reason I think they're related, right, is life, liberty, and the pursuit of land type stuff, free market economy and what happens when the government intervenes on like the pros and the cons. There's a bill saying that China can't buy land in Indiana. I'm going to let Matt get to talk about what he saw about that. But the reason I thought they were both related to be talked about at the same time, because it's also about property rights. And when they're doing that, when they're saying that someone can't buy your property, if they say a investor cannot buy your house from you, or they say China cannot buy your land from you, they are devaluing your property, right? So in one sense, the more people that are allowed to buy your property, the more it's going to sell for, period. Like if there's a chance that buyers are going to, so who are they protecting? Are they protecting? So what's happening with these new laws, like two very different reasons, but just the whole concept of if you own something and the government can put out any sort of law that will devalue it, I don't think that's fair. Now, maybe there's going to be like the when is it okay or not? Like murder's obviously not okay. So like, yeah, I'm not saying like free market works and you can kill your competitors, right? So I know there is a line where it stops, and maybe it's the China buying land thing. You know, it was like the China owning TikTok, all those different things. But I think it is silly if I talk just specifically about trying to limit, corporate buyers from the rental market. The crazy part about it is when the stats come out, the corporate buyers make up like less than 0.1% of what actually gets bought. Now, people owning 2 or 3 properties own they're not wrong when they're saying, hey, a certain percentage of houses, like, so 28% of properties bought in Texas in 2021 were bought by investors. But the definition was truly somebody that owned more than 3 houses, right? So or at least 3 houses. So that meant like you could be buying your 3rd house and then they considered you an institutional investor. So 28% of all homes in Texas were people that owned essentially more than 2 when they bought that 3rd house. Well, that's that life, liberty, and the pursuit of land and the pursuit of opportunity out there. But them saying it's illegal, that they want to make it illegal now because they want to bring housing prices down. So that's the intent. It's an affordability crisis. People can't actually buy houses to live in. So we need to do this. It's the wrong time to be doing it because you're doing it at a time when Texas real estate is already getting hurt more than most states in the country. Texas real estate is getting hammered compared to where their peaks were. And then also like the affordability is so different right now with rates the way they are. You know, it's not going to, the only thing it's going to do is devalue the real estate further.
Right.
It's not going to make it to where more people are able to buy homes. It's not going to have a positive impact. So it's like, it's just doing the whole thing at the wrong time. I think the government should stay out of it.
I agree. I mean, when you look at a lot of those institutional investors too, a lot of those hedge funds, a lot of those REITs, guess whose dollars those are? Those are teacher pension
funds. Yeah.
Those are firefighter and police officer pension funds. So it's not like, the white-haired, Wall Street dude is the guy who's laughing all the way to the bank. This is a model that many people are benefiting from, not just Wall Street. Now, Wall Street is maybe the vehicle in which it is facilitated through, but it is many Main Street investors who are putting money into their retirement, into these funds that are getting the benefits of owning real estate, which is one of the most proven, sustainable, stable vehicles for retirement and cash flow. So I think it's, there's a lot of layers to this, right? And just like every headline article, you got to really dig into it to understand what's going on. And I think a big component of it, right, is the timing of what's going on and raising taxes on the rich and get the Wall Street out of Main Street. They're hurting the little guy. And, again, there's an argument to be made for that. Absolutely. You can find those out there. But at the same time, I'm 100% in agreement with what Aaron says. Do I like competing with institutional capital when I'm not, the institutional player? I mean, if you're going up against them head to head, sometimes it can be frustrating. But there is enough opportunity out there for everyone who actually wants to partake in that opportunity to win. And I just think that this is another smokescreen that they're trying to get everybody riled up about when there are so many other bigger issues and causes that we should be talking about. And it's fitting the narrative right now. But I do believe, right, under certain circumstances, like what I put in there, China owns 384,000 acres of farmland in America. To me, that's, can we go over and buy 385,000 acres in China? No, you cannot.
Yeah, they're related, but that's why I thought they should be teed up together because of the line. 40 million acres in the U.S. or foreign. 40 million acres of 1.3 billion acres of farmland are foreign owned in the U.S.
It's crazy in all of this.
I see an issue in that. I mean, do you guys see an issue in that? I mean, we talk about our food production. That's a big deal. We talk about our energy grids. That's a big deal. It's a big deal, right? And when you've got a foreign adversary, our biggest foreign adversary in China, that are gobbling up our farmland, as much as I want free and fair, markets and trade, I think this may be one of those, scenarios where we need to at least have a discussion around it and start asking the questions why we're allowing these things and what is the net benefit as a result of allowing these things.
You look at what you guys were talking about, even on, the institutional buyers buying everything up. And again, this is just the other side of the argument, but I spent some time in Russia when I was younger, and there's so much government housing there. And trust me, you do not want to live in government housing. Like, if people think that their landlords right now suck, just wait until the government is providing housing. And so it's just crazy to me. I don't understand who these people think are going to provide their housing if investors aren't buying housing. I mean, Aaron gets raked over the coals when he posts a landlord post about how evil he is. And I'm not here to change, because I think most of our audience is probably in the same camp as us, but what do people actually think is going to happen if investors don't invest in housing? And I get the argument. People are saying that because institutions are coming in, buying up all this, then it's not affordable. But the thing that I told Tim to tee up here is a really funny video from Instagram. And the point that I want to make with this that kind of ties this back together is people, it doesn't matter. Let's just say that we did outlaw investors buying properties. And so then in theory, it makes housing cheaper. Well, how are you going to get the money to buy a house? You're going to borrow it from a bank. Tim, can you pull up this Instagram post?
So I'm thinking about opening a debt shop. Debt shop? Yeah. Thought I'd sell a bit of debt. What? Well, so I'll shout people whatever they want, like a house, and then they'd spend, the next few decades paying it off and copying whatever interest rate I say. Do you reckon people are going to go for it, though? I reckon it could be the best business model in the history of the world. Catchy name. Like Death Pledge. Death Pledge? Yikes. Maybe in French? Mortgage. Yeah, well, that's way classier. But how are you going to afford all these houses in the first place? Well, yeah. Maybe I'll use other people's money. Oh, mate, you've lost me. Well, I'll pay people a little bit of money if they give me their money to keep it safe. I mean, like a little bit of money. And then I'll just lend that out. Well, why wouldn't they just do it without you? Ah, this is going to be a faff. There's going to be tons of paperwork. Okay. How much money do you think you'll make? By 2024? About $10 billion in profits per bank per year. I'm going to call them banks, by the way. I don't reckon debt shop's going to take off. Smart.
This is you can
so
stop
good.
that, Tim. But it's just a cyclical problem, and nobody wants to pause and think about this. But okay, outlaw investors buying properties. Okay, so then what? Prices come down so that you can afford a house. But the reality is, that video just drives it home.
But Mike, what should we be caring about? Should we be caring about affordability?
Cares.
Should we be caring about value?
Money. What everybody cares about is money.
Because if there's less people buying and values go down, is that better for people? If prices go down and now more people can enter the market, is that better for people? I don't know what they're trying to accomplish. I think, Maddie, you maybe are alluding to factors like this is just posturing and virtue signaling, or less about strategy or growth of the economy. Are these a bunch of disgruntled renters and a small part of the population that goes to their senators and says, this is bullshit, I can't afford homes?
Well, it's a bunch of people that are a cog in a wheel that don't understand. That's what I'm saying. It's a bunch of people that just don't understand the fundamental economics behind any of it. And even if housing prices come down and you go borrow the money from a bank, are you any better off? No, you just created a death pledge. And so I'm just government housing is not the solution. Investors not investing in housing is not the solution, or keeping them from investing. It's chaos.
So Mooch, I think it's interesting that you say okay, when you say that other people can't buy land, that it reduces prices because it reduces demand or buyers. but I think there's a certain amount of demand that we should limit.
Yeah. So maybe that's us establishing the line, right? Like I think that it's so cool when you can come up with a moral argument that goes like, this is why it's wrong. This is why something is wrong. And then you go, well, what if it's like this? Well, what if it's like this? And then you get a point where you're like, oh, now it is wrong. Here it wasn't wrong. Here it is. The foreigners owning farmland. So I don't mind foreigners owning rental properties. I don't mind foreigners building apartment complexes and stuff like that. But then there is that line. Maybe there is this idea of they shouldn't be able to own property close enough to military base. So there's definitely a line on how you want, or maybe the line is, well, if we can buy it there, then they should be able to buy it here. But I'm a big believer in the free market. And I guess where my vision on that can get thrown off is like safety and and safety and war and random things. But it is, Mike's point was funny. The amount of the number of unemployed people that tell me that I'm the reason they can't buy a house. Now listen, the number of people that do not have jobs that tell me I'm the reason that they aren't allowed to buy a house because I bought them all is laughable, and it happens all the time.
Okay, guys, I just wanted to share this last article. Yeah, let's just finish on this last article. Maddie, I think this is really a fun way to end. Tim, maybe you can pull up this article about this office building in St. Louis. It's not pulling up on my side, but I'll tee it up for Maddie. Super fun, huh, Maddie? Like 90s, what is this? Like 90% reduction in value. St. Louis office building sells for $3.5 million. In 2016, it was worth $200 million. Boom.
That's insane, right? 44-story building. It was previously owned, I think, by AT&T in the downtown area. It sat vacant for quite some time. And obviously, office product is not the darling of the market right now. But to go from, 20 years later, to go from 205 million all the way down to 3.5 million is just insane to think about. And this is just the beginning. There's more of this going to be trickling out. And if Mr. Amuchastegui is correct and they hold rates for longer, there's a lot of sellers that are holding out right now for some relief in rates to recap their portfolios or to get values more in alignment based on what, cap rates and interest rates do as a result of that. So I think this is just a little bit of a glimpse of what we're going to see. Maybe not as extreme as this, but I will say I'm seeing more and more deals that are coming out that are in distressed situations, or that sellers are much more open-minded to having discussions around different structures and terms. And this was obviously a very extreme, example of that. But I think, again, the longer rates remain where they're at, the more distress and challenges that we're going to continue to see in commercial real estate. And it's going to be fun. I'm actually really, really excited about it.
It should be noted, residential never got hit with that big of a correction.
No.
When you think of 2006, 2007, 2008, 2009, we had houses going from 700,000 to 150, right? 700,000, 200, which was unfathomable. And this is a much bigger, more significant. Now it's an outlier example, and there's probably
It's
some
a big
reasons.
write-off. That's a lot of write-off for a bank.
200 million is a lot of mortgages. It's what is that? 1,000 mortgages. Right. It's crazy, and we're seeing a lot of office and commercial getting foreclosed on right now, and nobody's really buying it. And it begs the question of how low does it need to get for people to re-enter the market? And we're still driving by properties saying, I wouldn't take that for $0 right now. If somebody gave me that building, I wouldn't take it. So interesting. But yeah, that's a huge example. It was all over the internet this week. I'm glad you found that article, Maddie.
Wild, right?
I just think I wasted my last hour and 40 minutes, and I have no idea what to do with my life. I have no idea where things are going. I don't know what to invest in. I don't know what's going to happen in the world. You're right. You're just like us. Welcome to entrepreneurship. There we go. So do we. Fun time to be a spectator in the world and a participant in the world. Such a great episode. Fun to be all hands on deck again. I love it. The boys are back. Thank you so much for listening to the King's Table. Remember to leave us a 5-star review. Follow us on YouTube. Follow us on Spotify and Apple. Leave us a 5-star review. Leave us comments. And make sure you go to YouTube. We haven't had a chance to review the YouTube comments in a while. So maybe next week, we will review some of the comments that you guys have. Definitely on this episode, leave a comment. We talked about a lot of really fun things, and we would love to hear from you guys. But from myself, Ashish Nathu, the one and only Sage, Mike Ayala, the Caesar of commercial, the hero of hospitality, the oracle of office, Matty Etchison, and of course, the trend spotter himself, Aaron Amuchastegui. Love you guys. Good episode. Thank you so much for listening. Peace.